discretion is advised.
Hey everyone, this video is brought to you by Audible. Audible is offering you a free audiobook with a 30-day free trial membership. All you need to do is go to audibletrial.com/BG Unlocked. The link is in the description below, and now enjoy the video. Hey everyone, welcome back to Board Games Unlocked, and today I'm doing a how to play on CO2 Second Chance. Now just to clarify, this is the second iteration of CO2, hence the second chance part. The other thing I should make clear is that I'm going to be doing a how to play on the cooperative nature of CO2 because that seems to be the kind of the default way to play, and later on in the rulebook it explains the competitive way and also the solo. So I will not be touching on those. Well, I will be actually talking about the competitive and what makes it different, but I will not be doing a full-fledged how to play video. So let's go ahead and go to setup. Alright, so the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take the board and place it in the middle of the table. And then for the cooperative nature of the game, you're going to be looking for the handshake icon. The board is actually double-sided, so you will be looking for this that's set up around basically the ring of the board. So look for the handshake and you'll know you're in the cooperative version. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to set up each player. Now for the purposes of this how to play, I'm only going to be using one player as the example. So you're going to grab their color, their player board, and then you're going to grab a two-person or two-part player aid. So they look like this and they kind of go together. Why they did two separate parts, I literally have no idea. But they did. So you'll grab those. You will be grabbing each player's infrastructure marker. Looks like those. Control markers are bigger hexagon pieces. These, they're wooden cubes. These discs. And then scientists. And you might notice there's only one. The game actually comes with 4 of them. And you will place the other 3 over on the recruitment pool. And obviously I will be explaining that later, but the recruitment pool is the area of the board that has the scientist symbol and then another icon underneath, but you will be placing those over there. While you place one in the scientist area, you will then take the smaller hexagon and place it on the space with a 1 at the bottom, and then you will take 3 discs and you will place them on the right side with a 3. You will do this for every player that is in the game. And then the person who has most recently planted a tree will take the first player token. And that is the player setup. You will then place the cooperative marker right here on the score track. This will represent the group's victory points that they will be gaining and losing throughout the rest of the game. But you'll just place that right there. You will then place the 2 square cubes over on the decade track and the phase track. The decade track, I guess, is the lighter one, and then the phase track is the darker one. It doesn't really matter a whole lot, but you will be placed that. It starts on 2010 and then on space 1. You will then place a bank over on the side of the board, and then you're going to distribute money to each player based off the turn order that it is. So the first player is actually going to be getting $3. The second and third player will get $4, and the fourth player gets $5. I should also make sure that it is very, very important that you understand that the number is represented in billions, so just so you get that thematic touch. Over near where the victory point marker is, you're going to be placing the tech cubes in that pile. You can tell where they go because there's a tech cube symbol in that spot. And then you will give each player 2 tech cubes, which they will place at the top of their board, also denoted by a tech cube symbol. The next thing that you're going to do is you are going to be placing the projects over on their spot on the board, and they're represented by their symbol. There are 5 of them. You have recycling, water, wind, solar, and forestation. Just want to go ahead and show you guys a little bit of what they look like. So if it'll focus, there we go. So you will place them in stacks based on their level, and it goes level 1 to level 2, and you have to put them in this way. So level 1 goes on top, and then level 2, and then I should also show you that they are double-sided. So you do not want to place them that way. You want to place them in the way I have here, and you will place them on their spots in their stacks like so. Then immediately right after you do that, you're going to be placing the wooden tokens that match the projects, and you'll place them right behind where they go. So you have recycling, water, wind, solar, and forestation, like that. And they all look a little bit different, so you can't really tell them, or so you can easily distinguish them from one another, and you'll just place them in rows like that. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to shuffle the Energy Summit like tiles. You will shuffle them, and then you will place 6 of them face up in the slots that surround that are in the middle of the victory point track, like so. And you can tell that that's where they go because 1, the tokens fit, and 2, there's a little man on the back that looks like he's doing a speech, and that same icon is denoted in the middle between those 3, and you will just set the rest of the tiles off to the side. Next, you are going to take the regional agenda tiles. They look like this little hat, and you will place them around the areas right underneath the different continents. So, and they will go face up like so. So there's Oceania, North America, South America, Europe, Africa, and Asia. And you'll note that there will be actually 2 left, and those will go back in the box. Next, you will take the fossil fuel power plant tiles, and they look like this with this on the back, and you will shuffle them all together, and then you will just place them off to the side like so. If you are doing a 3-player game, you will actually return 6 of the gas tiles, and you can tell what those are by being they have a 20 on the back side of them. So you'll, in a 3-player game only, you will remove 6 of those from the game. Otherwise, you will shuffle all of them together and then place them over to the side of the board. Next, you will take the global CO2 pollution level marker and place it on the 400 ppm space, which is right here, and it's the only one with a symbol up at the top, and you will just place it like that. Okay, so next here we're going to take the CEP markers. The CEP markers are these purple discs, and there are a bunch of them. What you will do is you'll place them in their spots on the board, and you can tell what the spots are by the purple circle in the middle. So you will just fill up each spot like that. The other way of looking at it is like each continent has their own spots. So Asia has 6, Oceania has 4, and then so on and so forth. You will then take the rest of them and you'll put them over to the side as a bank. I lied! You will actually take 2 CEPs and put them in the middle on this spot. This is the market, so 2 of them are there. And you will then find the red marker and you will place it on the 3. How you know it's a 3 is 1, I just told you, and 2, the 3 has a circle on it, so you know that that's where it starts. Next, you will be setting up the environmental goal tiles. These look like this, and there are 3 different colors. There are blue, pink, and green. Now what you will do is you will take all of these and you will put them in the black cloth. You will shuffle said tiles in the black cloth, and then you will pull them from, and then you will fill up these 3 different regions. Now these 3 regions are color coded, so you will fill this region up with green tiles, this region up with pink tiles, and then that region up with blue tiles. That's what it will look like when all is said and done, and then you will just take the rest of them that are in the bag and you will put them in the box. Next, you will shuffle the 2 different types of UN cards. There are the blue ones and then there are the white ones, and you will make a display of each type depending on the number of players, and you will figure that out by looking at the victory epithet cards. And on the back of them it shows a setup for the cooperative. So in a 1-player game you will set up 4 of each, and then a 2 to 4-player game depending on then. So in a 4-player game you would set up 3 of each, 2-player game 5 of each, and then 3-player game 4 of each. And you'll just take them and you will place them face up like so in the corner. And I know these aren't going to make any sense while I'm setting it up, but I will explain them later. But yeah, you will just take 1 of each and place them face up like that, except whenever they're not upside down and you look like a fool. So they'll just go like that off to the side, and then you can put the rest of them back in the box. Next, you will shuffle the cooperative objective tiles, and you can tell these are what they are is because you have the handshake symbol around that, and you will take 2 of them and give them to each player, so they will just get placed near them and then be used for later on throughout the game. One also thing while I'm looking at the player board that I forgot to mention is I know I mentioned 2 tech cubes. What you will also give them are 2 CEP tokens. And those will go in the 2 spot right in between their scientists and their tech cubes. I am very sorry about that. And the last thing that you're finally going to do is you are going to shuffle the lobbyist cards, the ones with the clipboard on the back, and you will deal each player 5 of them. So they will just go next to their player board. There is a variant that you can do, is you can actually draft them. So you will give each player 5, and then you'll choose 2 and you'll pass it on. So eventually you can draft them once you're more familiar with the game. But personally, I actually like just giving each player 5 and trying to make the best of what you have versus a draft, because it's a cooperative game, so it also doesn't really matter like who gets what. So I don't know why it's a variant, but it is. And then you have CO2 all set up. And that is the setup of CO2 Second Chance. Now, in CO2, you are corporations that are trying to prevent basically, you're trying to prevent global warming and the catastrophic events that would be caused by such. Each person in the cooperative game will be taking one main action. You have to take a main action and up to 3 executive actions. And then the person to their left will go, and then so on and so forth. And then depending on the number of players, you'll go a certain number of rounds, and then you'll go into other phases. There are 4 phases in the game. There's the operations phase, the income phase, the global phase, and then so on and so forth. And I'll explain those. With that being said, this is the Vita Lasarda game. So everything in this game, every little piece, everything is basically very cohesive and is like a gear, and they all relate to one another. So I'm going to explain how this game works, basically kind of the same way that the rule book does, but adding a little bit more detail to each step. So I'm going to jump into the operations phase, which is basically the player turn, and then kind of explain everything that's centered around that. So the first thing that I want to point out is that the number of operations phase that you get is dependent on the turn order. So, not the turn order, the number of players. So this cube is the operations marker, or the round marker, and this is the operations phase, the white spots. In a 4-player game, each player will get two full turns, and then you'll move on to the income phase. In a 3-player game, you go to 3, and in a 1 or 2-player game, you go all the way to 4. So once everyone has done 1 turn, then you would move it to the second one, and then everyone does another turn, then you would move it to the income step in a 4-player game. So I wanted to explain that before I went into what the operations phase is about. The other thing that I need to explain before I move on is that these tracks here represent knowledge for the individual ways you can do renewable energy. So there's the wind knowledge, solar, water, forestation, and then recycling. A lot of actions in this game give you knowledge on these tracks, and basically when that happens, and I'll explain when they do, is you will take one of your discs, one of your circular disc, and you will place it or move it up the track. So if, for example, I did an action that gave me a solar knowledge, and I was the yellow player, and I hadn't had any knowledge in that track, you take a disc and you place it onto the very first spot of the track. Now, let's say I was already there, then I would, let's say I gained another solar knowledge, then I would just move up the track. So that's how gaining knowledge works. You can never lose knowledge within the game. And that's for every single track. They all work virtually the same way, but they have different steps and they have different bonuses for reaching a certain level of knowledge in each one. But they'll make a little bit more sense later on. I just wanted to explain that knowledge, like there are a bunch of actions that get you knowledge, so I didn't want people to be like, I didn't want to explain an action and then leave something out. So that's the knowledge tracks. Alright, so now on a player's turn, they have to do 1 main action and then up to 3 executive actions. The first main action that you can do is propose, and that is proposing a new project. Now the projects, if you remember from setup, were these tokens. the U looking ones on the setup, and there were 5 of them: recycling, water, wind, solar, and forestation. Whenever you propose a project, you choose which one that you want over on the left side, and then you place it anywhere that you want as well. So if, for example, I wanted to place, let's just say, a recycling project over into Oceania, I think that's how you pronounce that. Wait, okay, so I know this is a how to play, and probably the first interview that's actually in a how to play, but I just want to do a quick rules correction. When I explain that whenever you propose a plant and you can place it anywhere, that is technically true. You can place it anywhere that matches what that country is needing. So that little hat tile that's above it that shows the 3 different types of plant symbols, those are the only plants that can be proposed and placed there. Now the 3 slots, you can place the plant anywhere on those 3 slots, but it still has to match the 3 that the country is requesting. I do reiterate that later on in this how to play, but I wanted to tell you up front so you're not confused whenever I explain the rest. So enjoy, and I hope this video helps out a lot. You will place it on one of these 3 spots, one of the 3 kind of clear ones, not the outlines, not the ones with the decades on them, the 3 ones. And you'll place it really wherever you want, and each of these gives you a bonus for when you place it. So the first one that you place, like on the left side, and these all work the same for every single continent, you will receive money equal to how many CEP discs are in that continent. So if you placed in Oceania, you would get $4. If you placed in North America, you would get 5. If you placed in Asia, you would get 6. And if you placed in Africa, you would get 3. So that's how that area works there. If you placed in the middle, you would gain a scientist from the reserve, and you placed the scientists up in the reserve earlier for setup. So the reserve over there, that's where you would get it. Or you can move a scientist, and moving a scientist is an executive action that I'll explain later, but you can move a scientist with that as well. The third one is easier. You would just take 2 tech cubes and you would put it onto your player board. So whenever you place a project, we'll place it there just because it's easier, you immediately gain knowledge in that project. So since I placed a recycling one, I would then go over and look at the recycling track. If I'm the yellow player and I don't have any knowledge there, then boom, I just place one of my discs on the first space, and that's that. You gain knowledge every time you propose a project, and you gain the knowledge based off the project that you propose. So thematically, you must know a little bit about something to be able to propose a project. Now, that's so if I propose another recycling, then boom, I'm at the 2nd spot, and so on and so forth. So that is proposing a project. The second main action that you can do is infrastructure, and infrastructure tokens are the ones that each player has in their own color. I don't really know what they look like. A gun, I guess. Pew! Whenever you do infrastructure, you have to pay a CEP token. So remember, every single player started with 2 CEP tokens. You would pay 1 from your player board, or you can pay from an area you control. And controlling areas I will explain a little bit later, but essentially you can kind of have control in these countries, and the countries can help you build more plants. So let's say you pay the 1, so you pay it from your player board, and it would just go into the bank over on the side, and then you will grab one of your infrastructure markers and you will slide it into the top like that. But that's not it. Whenever you do an infrastructure, you will actually get a benefit for the project that you actually infrastructure, and each of them give you something a little bit different. The recycling plant gives you gives you $5 and also gives you a CEP from the market. So whenever you would infrastructure a recycling, grab $5 from the bank and a CEP from the market, and then you would flip it So now that is flipped to show that it has been infrastructured, and you have the actual wooden piece in that, like so. Now, each of them give you something a little bit different. Water, and they are actually all on your player board as well. So if I show you the player board for each person, like that, up at the top with the little gear symbol, it shows you what you get. So recycling gives you a CEP, or you pay a CEP, you gain $5 and a CEP. Water, each of them you'll pay a CEP. Water, you get $3, a tech cube, and a CEP. Wind, you get $5 and a tech cube. Solar, you get 3 tech cubes, and forestation, you get 2 CEPs. That happens every single time you infrastructure, you will be gaining those. So that is the infrastructure main action. The third and final main action that you can do is building a power plant. Now this is where knowledge comes into play very, very heavily. This is the most important aspect of the game, is building power plants, because how are you going to fight global warming if you actually don't have any power plants to do so? So whenever you go to build a power plant, you have to choose a project that is a project that has been infrastructured and is a level that's equal to or lower than your knowledge in that plant. So remember how I said that knowledge was important? So we have a recycling plant that is infrastructured and ready to be built. No one has knowledge in that, so no one would be able to actually build the power plant with that. But let's say over time, yellow actually did put one in there. So you will see on each track, let me zoom out a little bit. Each track shows you the level. So recycling has a level 1 almost immediately. As soon as someone gains knowledge, they will be able to build level 1 power plants. As soon as they get to level 2, they can now do level 1 or level 2s. Wind, you need to at least get to the second spot before you can build a level 1. Same for solar. Water is the same as the recycling. Very first level gets you level 1. Before station, you have to be to the third spot before you can build level 1. So each of them play a little bit different and require different types of knowledge to be able to actually build plants. But we have a level 1 recycling plant that is infrastructured, ready to be built. So let's say one of the players, it's their turn, they choose to do the executive, or not, the main action to build a power plant. They do so, and how you build is it costs a certain number of things. So let's look at the player board again. I should also mention real quick that whenever you choose your action on your turn, you will take the smaller hex cube and you will put it on the action you're doing. So in this case, we have, this is propose, that's infrastructure, this is building a power plant. So you would place it there. Now, since it's a recycling plant, you take a look at the different spots. So a level 1 is up top. It costs $7, $7 billion, 1 CEP, and 1 technology cube. So if you, I mean, there's obviously no money here, but if there were 7 there, you would take those, put them in the bank. The CEP you would put into the bank, and then the 1 technology cube. And then you would go to the project. Go to the project. You would grab the recycling power plant. You will slot it up top, so it looks like a little sandwich like that, which is pretty cool. And then you will move this up into the spots based off the current decade. So that's what the outlined ones are. So at the beginning of the game, everyone starts in 2010. So then you would take the plant and you would move it up into 2010. Now there's a couple things that does. One, it actually protects you from kind of the other phases where the continents are wanting to, they're like, hey, well, we don't really have anything, but we need energy, so we're going to do fossil fuels. And it can also replace fossil fuels that get placed in the in these continents later on in the game. But so that's what you'll do, and you will always do the leftmost empty spot. So let's say it's 2030, and there are none here. Well, you would still move it onto the 2010. You would not move it onto 2030 because Oceania is a few decades behind. So that is what you do. And then one thing that's also very, very important is you gain points equal to the level and the plant that you did. So if we take a look at the recycling one, if you can see that, I'll just move it. The recycling plant gives you 5 points. That's what, and then 6 points for a level 2 plant, and then so on and so forth. So as you can see, the higher up you go, the more difficult ones net you way more points. But what you do is then you just go up on the point track. So a level 1 recycling plant gets you 5 points. And that is the oh no, sorry, I almost forgot, because this is also important, kind of. The person who built the power plant, not the person who infrastructured it, and not the person who proposed, but the person who actually did the work and paid the money and built it, the person will take one of their cubes and they will place it in the spot that correlates to the power plant. So, for example, we have a recycling one that was built. Red built it. On their turn, they would take a cube and place it in the 3rd spot underneath the recycling symbol. One thing I did forget to mention, but since it's an example, it's not that bad. Each of these areas, these basically requests for the continents, they have specific needs. So Oceania, they want wind, water, and recycling. So no other types of plants can be put there. They don't want solar, they don't want forestation, so those are the ones that they want, so those are the ones you have to build. You can't even propose a plant that doesn't meet those requirements. So you got to keep that in mind whenever you are playing, because sometimes you'll get ahead of yourself and then, you know, mess up a whole how to play. But so you place a control marker there, and then you check for control over that area. If you're the one that has the most cubes there, you take one of your bigger hexagon and you place it on that spot. That shows that you have control over that. What does control mean? Well, it allows you to kind of use CEPs a little bit more freely. Remember how I said that you have to pay a CEP to infrastructure or even build? Well, you can actually use ones on your board or the ones available in continents that you control. So that's why it's important. But let's say that a few people built at some point, and now there's a tie for most cubes. Well, how that works is you basically go from left to right and determine who it has the most needs. So if they wanted a water plant, and let's say one was built there, then yellow would actually have control over that because they have a better one than recycling. If someone came in and put a wind one there, then they would have control. But if there was a wind one here but 2 yellow there, then yellow would still maintain control because they have the most. So that is control, and that is building a power plant. Again, you can only build and do and propose power plants in areas that they are asking for. So those are the 3 main actions. Next, I'm going to move over to executive actions, and there are 3 executive actions that you can do. Now, going back to the player board, similar to whenever you're doing a main action, so you can do executive actions before or after your main action. And remember, it's 1 main action and up to 3 executive actions, but you can only do each of them once. So essentially, on your turn, you can do 4 actions. But so let's say, and similar to the main action, you have 3 discs that you will place to denote that you have done them. So going from top to bottom, the executive actions, that one of them is the cards, is playing cards. So I'm going to explain what the cards look like. So there are these cards that you have in your hand, and each person has 5 of them. So you only do these whenever it is your turn. So, for example, this one right here, and each of them relate to like certain actions that you do. So there's propose, there's the infrastructure, there's propose, and here's propose. And there is a spot in the rulebook that explains what all these do, and you can actually find them easier because there is a number at the bottom to tell you what it does. So there are two things on these cards. One is the main action that you can trigger once you do that action. So if I proposed a project in the first spot, the spot that gives you money, then I would get 2 technology cubes. So whenever you play that, so I propose a recycling plant in Oceania, I place in the spot, I would get my $4 and do the whole proposing shebang. Then I play this. So I would take the yellow disc and place it on that because I am playing a card. So since I did that, I would take 2 technology cubes and I would place them in my spot. And that's it. That is an executive action. So there's another thing on these cards. And I'll explain that a little bit whenever I explain the other executive action, but there is a little slot down at the right corner, and that is also important. So just keep that in mind. The other thing that you can do is you can grab UN cards. So I'll explain what these UN cards kind of look like. And these are important to how you win the game as a team. So the cards kind of look like this for the most part, except they're not fuzzy. And they show a couple things. So they're all about infrastructure. And so the player who is going to grab this card, well, not really grab this card, but flip it over, has to have infrastructure buildings in these types of plants. So whenever it's their turn, instead of playing a card from their hand, they can do an executive action to flip one of these cards. So this means they need to have infrastructure in these buildings that have been built. So not just having them on the board, they have to have actually been personally built, and that is a water and solar. And then they have to play 2 tech cubes from their board, and then they would gain the team $2. $2 what? 2 points. Please ignore the 6, 10, 15, all that. That's only for competitive. For the cooperative, these are worth 2 points. So instead of playing a card from their hand, like I said, they could look over here. Let's say red did that. They spend the 2 tech cube. They flip that over. Yay, they have now done one of them. How many you need to basically meet and flip and do the action is dependent on this card here. And it tells you, play all 4 decades, claim all but 3 UN goal cards. So there's 6 here in a 4-player game. And there's 2 different types. There's the easier ones to meet for infrastructure, but they cost more tech cubes. And then the harder ones to meet for infrastructure, but they cost less tech cubes. So that is the card's executive action. The second executive action you can do is visiting the CEP market. And you can do 2 things while you're there. You can buy CEP or you can sell CEP. So buying is very simple. You would just pay the cost that the red disc is on and put the money in the bank, and you will take one and you'll put it on your player board. If there are still CEPs in the market, nothing happens, and that was the action. But if you emptied it, if the market ever becomes empty, then you can't buy from there anymore. But then the price of CEP goes up. So in that case, and then 2 more come from the bank, and then just put it back on, and then you're ready to buy it again. So that's how price fluctuates for the CEP. If you were to sell CEP to the market, then it has to come from the player board. So you can't sell CEP of areas that you control. And then the one that you sell also does not go back to the market. It goes to the bank to the side of the board, but the price goes down. So it's like, hey, well, they obviously don't need it. So I mean, that's how you can lessen the price for buying them. So if I sell one for my board, you would get the money for how much it costs, and then now it goes down by 1, and then that's really visiting the market. It's pretty straightforward. So you can buy or sell CEPs to the market, and that is the second executive action. The third executive action is moving scientists, and so this is very, very important. So there are ways and areas that you can move your scientists to. So you can move your scientists from your player board to any unoccupied project. So we'll keep using this recycling one as an example. But let's say I move my scientist to a project. He would go there, and that would be the move scientist action. So only one scientist can ever be at a project, so no one else would be able to move there, and then that's just one way that he can be moved. The other way that, or the other place that you can move a scientist in is to a played lobbyist card. So remember how I said this was important? This is where you can send scientists, and they will be there for the remainder of the game. So these are one-time use bonuses. So if I were to move my scientist from my board or anywhere to that spot, I would gain the $2, but then that scientist stays there for the rest of the game to denote that it has been used. So basically, if you go to anyone's lobbyist card, they're going to lose a scientist, or everyone's going to lose a scientist for the remainder of the game. So just keep that in mind, but they can be helpful in a pinch. Other areas you can move is you can move from proposed projects to any unoccupied proposed project. So if there was another recycling plant here, like that, those would actually be like that because that would be infrastructured. So let's say I moved from here to here, and you might think, well, why would you do that? Because every time you move a scientist from an area, they gain knowledge in that area. So since I moved a scientist from that project, I would be able to gain 1 knowledge in recycling, and they gain knowledge in the plant that they were at. So if I moved from here to here, hey, I gained more recycling. So you can bounce back and forth from plant to plant and just keep gaining more and more knowledge in recycling if you wanted to. So you could also move from a proposed project to a lobbyist card. So as long as the lobbyist card is free, you can move a scientist there. You can also move scientists to the energy summits. So these tokens there. And the only way you can get to these summits is when you are moving a scientist from a proposed project. They cannot come from your board. They cannot come from a card. They have to come from proposed projects. And they have to go to summits that correlate to their project or their plant that they came from. So if that scientist came from a recycling plant, he would have to go on a spot that has a recycling icon. Thematically, it is that scientist knows a lot about that, so that's what he is at the summit to speak about. It wouldn't make much sense if he came from a recycling plant and started talking about solar energy. So if he moves there, then once again, since he moved from a recycling plant, that player gains knowledge, and then he goes there, which it would make sense if I showed you exactly what I'm talking about. So he would just go there. Those scientists will stay there, not for the rest of the game, but they will go until that summit is full. So in Paris, which is what that tile has, once a scientist goes there for water, solar, and wind, then at the end of the player's turn that filled up that summit, everyone would gain knowledge on that. So energy summits gain you knowledge in one of 2 ways. Every scientist there, or every player who has scientists there, they can either gain 2 knowledge in what they spoke on. So if that filled up, red player could gain 2 more recycling knowledge, or you can gain 1 knowledge of 2 different types that was there. So the red player could gain a knowledge in solar and wind and water, or water and solar, or recycling and water, or any combination thereof. Every player who has a scientist there would get 1 for that. So if red sent all 4 scientists there, wow, red has the smartest team. So they would gain 2 in each, or any combination of, depending on where they're at on the track. So that's energy summits, and remember, you can only go to these if you move from a project. So there are a couple restrictions on scientists. Like I said, only 1 scientist can be on a project, on a lobbyist card, or on an energy topic. I guess I didn't mention that part. Scientists can never move to projects with infrastructure. So that's pretty much it. You can never move to an energy summit from your board, which I know I mentioned before, but like I said, they have to come from a project. And then yeah, that's pretty much all the restrictions. Once again, you cannot freely move him till the summit's over, and once they're on a lobbyist card, they cannot be moved for the rest of the game. So, whenever you recruit a scientist, I should mention, you gain a knowledge of any type you want, and how you get a scientist is from that second action of projects. Once you place there, you can recruit one, and you can pull him to your player board. And actually, the lobbyist, or not the lobbyist, the recruitment pool shows that icon, and you can gain a knowledge in any field that you want. So if Red got a red scientist, they could start doing forestation, or they can do solar, or whatever. So that icon is right there to show you that you would gain a knowledge. And that is the Move Scientist executive action, and that's all the actions for the players. One thing I should mention about the knowledge tracks, because it comes up a lot, and it's one thing that everyone has to manage, is there are these symbols here that players get once they pass on or pass over, and the like they're kind of self-explanatory, but let's say yellow moved up and got on that spot for level 3, then they would gain a knowledge in solar. Once they hit the spot there, they would gain a knowledge in forestation. Once they go there, then they would gain a CEP from the bank, and once they get there, they would gain a knowledge anywhere they wanted to. Once a player has max knowledge in something, nothing special really happens, but that can be very, very beneficial depending on the environmental goal tokens, which I'll explain in a little bit, but I just want to kind of go over some of the little icons that you get and what they mean. So the next phase that happens after everyone does their actions and does their turns is the income phase. Now what you will be doing is you will look at the knowledge tracks again, and you will take a look at the first 2 stacks of discs. So if this was a situation for wind energy, if it went yellow, blue, and then red, the only people that would be getting paid are the first 2. So in this case, yellow and blue would be getting their compensation depending on which row that they're in, or not row, column. So yellow could choose to get 4 points or victory points. So these numbers indicate money or victory points, and you can get any combination, and you'll decide. So it's like, oh, I'll get $1 and then 3 victory points. You can do that. Then blue will make that same decision, deciding to get 3 victory points or $3, but red would not get anything. Now, if it went like this, like that, then yellow and blue would get to choose between 4 money or 4 or any combination there, and red would also get paid because you look at the first 2 stacks. If pink was in number 1, then pink would not be getting anything, but yellow, blue, and red would. And you will do that for all of the different knowledge tracks. So you'll go down from wind to solar, water, forestation, and recycling. Every player that is getting paid can either choose to get money or victory points, and any combination thereof. So that is the income phase. The third phase that you move on to is the environmental goals phase. And this is where gaining victory points can be very, very beneficial. You might have been thinking during the income phase, well, why wouldn't I get money? Why would I need victory points? Because of this track and the next phase after. So there are these tokens that you set up early for setup, and each of them correlate to certain areas on the board. So the green ones deal with built plants. So every time that you meet the requirements of an environmental goal, you flip it over. So for example, if I had built that recycling plant, all these recycled tokens get flipped over, like so. And you can do this right now just to see if you've met them, or you can do it throughout the game. I would highly recommend that you do it throughout the game just because it's easier to do and you can focus and look over. If I built that recycling plant in Oceania, those would get flipped over as well. So basically the ones that have names on it, that's where plants need to get built, and then the ones that have symbols on them, those are the types of plants that you want to build. Remember, they have to be built plants. They cannot be infrastructure. They cannot be projects. They have to be built. Next, are the pink tiles. Those indicate the knowledge track. So if you come and look over at the knowledge track again, you will see those pink spots. With the symbols on these tiles, so for example, this one right here, means that you have to get to the purple spot, or not everyone, but one person has to get to the purple spot on the win track. As soon as someone gets to that, then they get to flip this tile over. There are some tiles, for example, I'll keep using the win one, that have this arrow on it. That means that you have to get to the top most spot on the wind. As soon as someone gets there, then you get to flip that tile over. So that the pink tiles correlate to the knowledge track. The blue ones deal with the summits. So some of them will show symbols like the other ones. So this one, for example, shows a forestation summit, and that means that a summit has to go off that has that symbol in it. So for example, if this Paris one went off, it wouldn't do anything because there's no forestation there. But it does have solar and water, so those tiles would get flipped. Others have a times on them, like there, or like there. There we go. Have a times on them. That means that a summit has to be fulfilled that has that many spots on it. So a Paris has 4 on it, meaning the tile I showed you would get flipped when the Paris summit concluded. The other ones on there have 2s and 3s and so on, and every time you meet those conditions, then those tiles get flipped. You might be thinking, well, what do we get for completing these? Well, you don't get anything, but what happens is that this phase is the phase you check for ones that you have not fulfilled. So in 2000, and then you will lose points for every single one of them that is face up. So in 2010, you lose 1 point for each face up environmental goal that you have not completed. Meaning that you would lose 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 21 points if you did none of those in the first phase, or in the first era. Decade, I guess, is really what it would be. Then you go to 2020. For every one that is still not completed, which means it's face up, you lose 2 points. 2030 is 3 points, and 2040 is 4 points, and that is for each tile. So you might have been thinking, well, why would I gain points instead of money during the income phase? This is one of the reasons why. Because earlier in the game, if you choose to gain money instead and you have 8 points, then you're gonna be losing 20 points if you don't complete any of those. So that's why I think it's easier to flip them over when you complete them, so you can do some math. Because you are more than welcome during the income phase to think about how many points do we need versus money based off the goals and stuff that we're about to get. So what's also very important about this phase is that, let's say you lose all your points. At the end of this phase, if your score is below 0 victory points, you lose. The game is over. That's that. You failed. You couldn't do anything for the environment. You're depressed, and that's that. So, because it specifically says below 0 victory points, if you have just enough, let's say you had 21 points and you didn't do any and you're down to 0, that is okay. As long as if you only had 20 points and you lost 1, then you are below and you lose the game. So that's the environmental goals phase. And the very last phase, well, technically that you do anything in, really, is the energy supply phase. So what you do here is, for each country that is in the game, you are going to be checking to see if they have any of the plants built for that era. So the rule of thumb is start in the country that you're playing this in. So I'm in North America, so we would take a look at where North America is, which is right here. And since this is the beginning of the game, if it was 2010, you check to see if there is a plant here. If there is, like, let's say, yay, a recycling plant was built here. There's no infrastructure there, but let's say, then you skip it. They're doing what they're doing for the decade that you're in, so we are good. But if there is not, then the countries are relying on fossil fuels to get them their energy. That relates to, gas, coal, electricity, all that kind of thing. So if we were looking at North America, you would look at 2010, which is the darker one, really, and then you would be placing a fossil fuel token. And remember, you set these up at the beginning of the game. They look like this. So what you do, I'm going to move these over to show you kind of the tracks, if I can get it. You then flip it. So this is oil. Oh yeah, oil was another one. So this is oil. What you do with this token is you place it in that spot, in that decade spot. So since it's 2010, you would place it there, and then you increase your CO2 emission level by that number. So since I'm at 400, now it's at 430, like so. And you do this for each one of the continents that does not meet the requirements. So essentially, if I built no plants in this game, which I would be losing anyway, you would be placing one in each one for that decade. So, South America would get one, and you'd go up by that number. It's always the number of the tile you place. So I should mention, let's say it's 2020, which is this spot right here, and North America still doesn't have one. So another tile would get placed there, but you do not add them together. So let's say it was another 30, your emission level wouldn't go up by 60. It would only go up by the tile that you were placing in that moment. Thematically, it's that, well, I'm already using oil. It's not like it's getting double. I'm just adding more. One thing that I did fail to mention during the energy supply phase is that whenever a fossil fuel gets placed in any of these, and you will do this for each one every time a fossil fuel gets placed, you'll basically check to see if there is control in that area. So in North America, that oil plant was built. If no one controls it, meaning that, remember, plants are built and there's cubes here and someone has a control disk right here. If none of them are built, then you will take that country's, one of their CEP tokens, and you will place it on that tile, like so. You will do this for each one of them. And then, after all those have been placed, if it has a CEP token like that, then that token just gets removed from the game. So over time, as countries are doing fossil fuel plants like that, their CEP gets lower and lower, meaning that over time, that action that gives you money will not be enough because they're running the plants. But if someone does control it, let's say the red player controls that area, then they have to take a CEP from areas that either they control or from their player board. So if they then that just goes away. So either way, one token is going to be getting lost from countries they control. But let's say they controlled, South America, so they can actually pull a CEP from that if North America was getting hit quite a bit, or they can pay it from their own player board. But if they cannot, if that controlled player, and what you would do is you would place their token on that instead of a CEP. But if they're unable to pay a fine, meaning or if they're unable to pay a CEP, then they have to pay a fine. And what that does is you have to take a CEP from the market, like from over here. So let's say red didn't have any, and there wasn't any in North America. Then they would have to take one from here, put it into the bank, and the group loses victory points based off of the market price. So let's say market was really high, they couldn't pay it, they had to take it from the market. That means that the group would lose 8 victory points. And that happens for each area. So if someone controlled, South America, then, and they couldn't pay, you'd have to pay a fine. If it was Europe, and so on and so forth. So that's something that that happens after you play the tile, and then raise your emissions by that number. Then you check to see if there's any control, and then move discs onto that tile. I should also mention that the person doesn't lose control of that area. After you pay the fine or do whatever it is, you would just move it back onto that spot. So that's something else for the energy supply phase. So you'll do that for each one of the continents, raising your emission level over here by that number. So this is very important as well because it goes up to 500. That is your cap. That is your max. But it can go over 500. Sorry, 500 is really is the black spot. You don't want to be that. You actually want to be 490. 490 is really where you can be comfortably. If you go over 500, which I believe to be terrible, then you wrap around and you go up even more to deal with that. So that's bad. What you can then do after you have been done placing all your fossil fuel tokens for each continent, depending on the decade that you're in, you then have the opportunity to lower your emission level, depending by a certain number of victory points. So let's say I did really bad, and I got all the way, so it's 500, and let's say I got to 550. And how I've been doing is I'll just put like a marker on the 500 plus and then just keep moving up. So depending on the decade that you're in, similar to the environmental goals, you can reduce that. Depending on the decade, you can spend 1 victory point to lower it by 10. In 2020, it's 2 victory points to lower it by 10. 2030, it's 3 victory points to lower it by 10, and in 2040, it's 4 victory points to lower it by 10. And that is for each time you spend. So let's say it's 450 or 550, and I have, 15 victory points. Yeehaw, yay me. If I want to get it, and you have to get it below 500. If at this point you don't spend any victory points, and you're at 550, then you check to see if you have 0 victory points or your emissions are higher than 500, you lose the game. So you would have to spend victory points to get it lowered. So since it's 2010, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then I'd be at 500, 6. It would cost me 6 victory points to lower that to 490. Any tip I could give you is that you don't want to ever be on that cusp. You don't want to be at 490 because it's going to go over, and it's going to, in later decades, it's going to cost more and more victory points. So if you can, you want to lower it while it's cheap. So if you have 10 victory points and you want to lower it by 10, spend that 10, get it down to 400 because it's only going to get bad as time marches forward. So that's reducing the pollution levels. That's the fossil fuels environmental phase where you are placing fossil fuels and raising your emission level. So that is the end of the 4th phase. The 5th phase, technically yes, there are 5 phases, it's kind of like the cleanup. So what you do is you move the decade marker. So now that moves up to 2010 to 2020. You then pass the first player marker to the person to the left, not to the left, I'm sorry, to the person on their right. It goes counterclockwise. Everything else is to the left. And then you check for game end. So what you do and how you win CO2 is you have to basically meet the epithet. So now that you understand everything, how you win is based on this card. So in a 4-player game, you win if you complete all 4 decades. You complete a private goal, which I'm about to explain, and then you claim all but 3 of the UN goal cards. And I showed you earlier when I was explaining the UN. If you meet all that after 4 decades, you win the game. Yay! And you cleaned up Earth and no global warming. Wouldn't that be nice? But you also check the game end and you lose if you don't complete all 4 decades. If no player has completed their private goals, or if there are more than 3 UN cards left unclaimed. So every player has 2 private objective cards that you gave them at the beginning of the game. And throughout this game, they have to meet that. And these are also in the back of the book, and they you can find them by their number there. So basically, these here mean in a 4-player game, I need to control 2 of these continents. So if I control those at any point, I have completed that, and I've done my objective. This one right here is I have to have 2 infrastructure in these in at least 2 of these continents. So everyone's will be different. There are a couple things you cannot talk about your private objectives. Even though it's a cooperative game, you cannot talk about that, and you can also not talk about the lobbyist cards that are in your hand. So to win, everyone has to at least meet 1 of those 2 cards. The 3 of the UN cards have to be completed, and then you have to survive all 4 decades. And that is how you play CO2. And that is CO2, everyone. In the competitive game, you are going to be doing the best that you can and working very extensively together to make sure that you have enough points to be able to build all the plants and actually complete all the goals and do such. There's a lot to it. There's a lot to this game. So I hope I did a good job in explaining how you play this. I did say I would mention kind of what competitive is like. In the competitive nature of CO2, each person is trying to get as much wealth as they can. And instead of having the cooperative goals, you have a company goal and a competitive goal that you're trying to meet. You can't spend points to lower emission levels. Everyone's trying to gain points, and you gain points basically for having a bunch of money by the end of the game. Every $2 gets you a point. The UN cards you're going for individually, which will get you points. That's why the cooperative has the handshake with 2, and the numbers above that relate to people who can meet that. You're also going to be vying for control over the different continents, because it's going to give you CEP tokens, which are worth points at the end of the game. So it's a different nature, but the cooperative, I feel, is the way they wanted to play it, because it even says on the box, a cooperative game of global change. So it seems like they wanted it to be more cooperative, because in the competitive, if the emissions are too high as well, everyone loses. So it's semi-cooperative. Do with that what you will, but yeah, so that's the competitive nature. I think that was everything. I think I touched on everything in this game. I'm sure if there are anything if there's anything that I missed, any rules that I missed, any little nuances, feel free to leave that in the comments below, and I'll make sure to like and love it so it jumps to the top and hopefully people can see it. But other than that, that's how you play CO2 Second Chance. I hope you enjoyed. I hope this is very helpful for you. But other than that, like, comment, share, and subscribe, and have a wonderful whatever time of day it is for you. Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching this, and if you like this video, then click the subscribe button below to enjoy any video that I put out. And right next to that subscribe button is a little bell. Click that so you get notified of whenever I actually upload these videos. If you want to support the channel, you can definitely visit my Patreon page. The link is in the description below. Other than that, like, comment, share, and subscribe, and have a wonderful whatever time of day it is for you.